Rambler. I'm a long way from my home. If the people don't like me, they can leave me alone. Welcome to Songs of Experience, a Bob Dylan podcast where we explore the man and the music one song at a time. I'm your host, Henry Bernstein, and I'm very happy to welcome my new friend, live and in person, to the Songs of Experience headquarters, Brendan McCarthy, here to talk about one of Dylan's earliest recordings from the No Direction Home soundtrack, Rambler, Gambler. Hello, Brendan.
Hello.
Welcome.
Very nice to meet you.
Great to meet you.
Welcome me to your house.
Welcome to my home. Yeah, you're here. This is the debut of the new location of the Dylan Library, so you're don't get too distracted from it. So, Brendan, we connected online, Facebook, Twitter.
Mostly Facebook.
Mostly Facebook.
I knew you and of the group kind of just as people I know were getting together before some of the Chicago shows and local, regional shows and stuff like that. And I think this was following like last year's Chicago Sunday show. There's only one bar opened in Chicago before you see most people meeting for the Bob Dylan show before the show there. And I just passed, and then I saw you again, like going up between the two floors at the following Milwaukee show. I'm like, good to see you again. Have a good show. That's the extent of our crossing. And I know we've been in the circle of going to many of probably the same shows together.
And hopefully more
Indeed.
To come. Maybe we'll carpool to Alpine Valley.
Yeah.
So we've had those brief interactions, but I don't know, what's your Bob Dylan origin story, Brendan?
Indeed. I'll do, there's probably a long form version of it, and then, Scott, maybe
you can sleep over, it's fine.
We'll go with that. I'll break it into some phases or whatever. And I started pretty traditionally with exposure to CDs. I had older brothers. One was really into music, had the Columbia House collection of. He kept his in a drawer there, in his dresser drawer. So he just gave me access to all his CDs. And this is young enough. It's sixth grade or so, where I'm going through all the Who's albums, Rolling Stones, and Beatles, and stuff like that. He only had 2 Dylan CDs. I listened to the first one like going into 8th grade. I literally left a family's 4th of July party for that, kind of wanting to take a nap time in the afternoon. And
what were the 2 CDs?
This is funny. The Greatest Hits. And when I played that, I was like playing, I had a whole collection of my brother's CDs that were more like acoustic, Crosby, Stills and Nash and stuff. They'd be like songs I'd listen to before I doze off for naps or going to bed and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, all right, this looks acoustic. I popped it in. First song's not acoustic.
No.
So I haven't skipped over it and just went right to Blowing in the Wind, and that was that's a story I've heard from a lot of fans. Is you hear that Dylan voice from that mountain top or wherever.
Right. Well, the Greatest Hits, that's like the perfect introduction to Dylan. Did you like when you were listening to them, had some of those songs sort of been seeped into your subconscious? Like the first time I ever heard Greatest Hits, I was like, oh, I know this.
Yeah, right. I went and first, like, I was just thinking how much of a spread of different sounds are on that album. Like, he's pulled from a good handful of albums, but like, I the radio ones, 4th Street and like a Rolling Stone. I can't place if the memories are before or after, like, hearing the Greatest Hits, but like car rides with my family out west and stuff, like, I remember like, that's a Bob Dylan song on the random classic rock station in Nebraska or whatever.
Right. What was the other CD?
The other was Dylan in the Den.
Oh my God. Wow.
So right away I heard like a different Dylan voice and a different Dylan kind of album.
Yeah.
I didn't play that one a lot, right, and in 6th or 7th grade too much, but I kept coming back to it over through high school, and by like junior or senior year, those were the last 2 the Jerry Dead shows around. So I was into the Dead by then. Mm-hmm. Still didn't find the album really compatible until like much later. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so then. That's your introduction. When did you like really?
I had.
When did you become sick?
There you go. That was that 2 levels maybe, but like I had the kind of got. I was more playing like Dylan's general catalog and stuff. Like you, I think you mentioned once the guitar time, learning songs and guitar in college and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. That I started going to more and more shows around that time, but still kind of casually. Friends, if I found a friend who actually liked Bob Dylan and we had the same schedule, we'd go to the show. Mm-hmm. The cliff moment maybe was my wife got me actually Modern Times, and we went to shows right after that. So that was the 2009 part there, and I'd gone to a good handful earlier and stuff. But
did you go to those shows at that arena, the opening of the now Ice Arena or whatever it was called then in 2006 after Modern Times?
No, I know. Like this was maybe years after Modern Times came out, and I just gotten around to hearing 11th Theft. I was following all in there and stuff like that, but I was kind of spotty always the time up till the cliff moment, and then we just I'd gone to those, like, it was going back to the recordings, but so that going to the shows and then having an abundance of shows to attend for a good number of years. I've been pretty much going to them since about that year. That's also kind of when I got back on the discussion forums and found access to the recordings.
Oh, so you went into like the Expecting Rain deep dive.
And I kind of did it both with kind of live stuff piecemeal. It's still not that big of a huge deep dive on the. I pretty much kept up with what I was hearing as I was going to the shows and stuff. But like catalog wise, I've kind of many of his albums I listened to more in the irregular collection of what was available there. And in fact, like bringing it all back home, for years I thought the playlist was alphabetical order because of the way I had it organized.
Really?
And it plays out pretty well that way.
I'll have to give that a try. I'll make a Brendan Bring It All Back Home playlist of alphabetical. That's amazing. Yeah. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, before we get into the lyrics, I usually share some stats, like where this was recorded, the personnel, but we don't really have much of that. We think it was recorded, we know, in September 1960. A 19-year-old Bob Dylan recorded the song. This is his second earliest known solo recording session, second only to When I Got Troubles, which is also on the No Direction Home soundtrack, right? Which was a home recording in Hibbing. May of 59. So if this is September of 1960, that means he still wouldn't come to New York for another 5 or 6 months or so.
Right.
So knowing all that, Brendan, is there anything else we should know about this early recording? Even if it's just, Wikipedia information like that, because we're talking about about as early a deep cut as you can go.
Yeah. Now there's the two with the collection that it's kept on. I was just getting ready for this song. I'm like, is this from the party tape or the hotel tape? I can't even unread those.
Right.
Things. It stands out as like just kind of a earnest song amidst some different sort of experimental songs he does on whichever that collection is on there. And my appeal to the song isn't necessarily the time of where he's doing this and basically what happens in between that space before he gets to New York City. And like the simple melody. It's also a neat step of that it's a traditional song that it kind of takes some little simple steps away from the traditional song that it's from.
Right.
And the little Bob Dylan innovation maneuvers are.
It's very clear he is doing the Woody Guthrie thing that he was doing at that time, and to me it seems that way, and it seems like he is sort of just in his Bob Dylan way modeling that sort of version of a folk singer that he is maybe trying to be or maybe imitating, whatever it is.
Right.
It's not much different from the This Land Is Your Land that is also on the No Direction Home. And it's, other than either When I Got Troubles is a blues song, that's very similar too, I think. So he's definitely trying something out, but I like what you said about that, like he's still Bob Dylan. He's still doing his Bob Dylan thing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So, why this song? If you could have... you have the whole canon available to you. Right. I know I asked that to everyone, but I was knocked off my feet when you guys suggested Rambler. I had to think about it is that from No Direction Home? The second, right?
Yeah, right, exactly. I had to think about where I first started too, because I'd listened to those tapes literally on my joyride up to Hibbing once when I drove up there. But
right.
I'm like, oh, that actually is on on No Direction Home, and that sequence, the Dink song is right in there too. I don't remember exactly where Dink from originates, but like that, just going that sort of has more of that Dylan husky voice, or the smoky sort of. He really has a grip on that song in there, and I don't know.
He's like nose.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, he's doing the Bob Dylan thing on there.
Yeah, and I'd like that sort of when I had seen No Direction Home and listened to that soundtrack. That was a fresh 4 new songs fresh in a row for me as a listener, and it just kind of but kind of my first exposure to bootleg music too from Dylan stuff at that point when that movie came out. I liked how it just sort of pulled me away from all the traditional Dylan songs I had known from around that same period and stuff. The pre-Dylan songs.
Yeah, it's a little off the beaten path, but it's very authentic because it's about as early as you can get.
And there's like I'd always read about it as like the Woody Guthrie imitation stuff, but I you're picking up like the other sort of people that he was kind of into too in some of those tapes. And that brought me into that conversation of the recent movie with Pete Seeger and Dylan in the car.
Yes. Well, let's
We
just
will-
go there.
We don't have to just jump.
I was going to
over
say that, but let's go there. So they're driving in the car. So spoilers abound. This is coming out. This episode will be coming out March 15th. So the Oscars will have already happened, right? So maybe by the time this comes out, this is Best Picture. It certainly is nominated. But so Pete and Bob are in the car, and Bob asks if he could turn on the radio, and Pete says sure, and he says that's a flip side from Long Tall Sally, Little Richard, and Pete's like, oh, you like that rock and roll music, do you? But you consider yourself a folk singer, and then Timothy Chalamet just so deliciously has that Bob Dylan like, well, I'm folk singer, or some sort of version of folk singer, and then kind of trails off,
Right.
Amazing, but. I think obviously that what you're getting at is this question that Pete's asking him, right? Are you consider yourself a folk singer? And Bob, right? Is that what you're getting
exactly,
at?
Exactly, yeah. And he's like, I like all these other things too, and I just got to New York City.
Right.
It's pretty forward, Pete. I mean, you're my hero. I do want to have this conversation. And it's that's a good central thread in the movie.
Yeah, I mean they really kind of teed up like in that moment where where Pete's like a good song, a really good song, doesn't need the frills as he calls them.
Yeah.
And so they're sort of setting this up. Oh, this will come back later. I'm not saying it was telegraphs, but it was a very good device, a very good usage of that thing. But Bob is, I guess, trying all sorts of things at this time. He's kind of taking it all in and putting out what he can put out. He continues, come sit down beside me, come sit down right here, come sit down, love, I want you, love you boldly, so dear. So going back to the beginning, Rambler, Gambler, long way from home, people don't like me, leave me alone. And then now he's getting into sort of like the flirty love version of this. And Bob Dylan didn't write this. This is a traditional song. And it's funny because you're talking about A Complete Unknown, and I was thinking that this song is most well known by Alan Lomax and his father John Lomax, who to most people who aren't like folk music and Bob Dylan people, they might now think forever that Alan Lomax is the villain from A Complete Unknown, right? Because he's sort of, it's really just in the last act, but he becomes the villain of the movie. But he's the one who made this song famous. I wonder if Bob was listening to, who Bob was listening to when he heard this.
Yeah, right. I think I read somewhere that someone suspected that was the recording he was listening to. I listened to that a couple times today and the other day.
Me too.
The difference between the two, there are some lyric adjustments, I think. But the singer in that song kind of has this feeling of really kind of riding by on a wagon and kind of having a little bit more of a sob story that is more telling as an embellishment. And this is the song's very invitational. I think the way Dylan delivers it, and
is it more of like a swagger? Like he's already got the Bob Dylan swagger kind of
in this
in this version, Dylan's version.
I was thinking of swagger in the very first line, because that, like, if you don't like me, then leave me alone. I'm like,
right. He's like, if you don't like me, F you.
Just as much swagger as anything in the '90s, right. And I like, and then but the shift as it goes into the other verses still, like he's opening up this communication line with the whoever's writing this, singing the song to, or the the listener.
That shift from like this tough guy, leave me alone, to come sit down right beside me.
Exactly.
And that, I've talked about this so many times, mostly on like 80s Bob songs on this podcast, but that flirty Bob thing, it's almost too much to handle. Like the idea of like 19-year-old Bob Dylan, singing, come here. He was such a cutie then, and just to go in it, obviously he didn't write these words, but it's almost as if he did. And for my own personal history, I had never heard the song until I heard Bob Dylan sing it. It was only after the fact I learned it was a traditional song and went and listened to all the different versions. Right. So to me, it's a Bob Dylan song.
Yeah, exactly. Right. There's so much of a difference. Yeah.
It's funny because he has played this 0 times live. There's some more no stats for you.
I like that part of it too.
And I kind of, I will say he's played this 0 times live yet.
I can see this going.
Kalamazoo. Let's see. Let's do it. South Bend.
Yeah.
But I wondered. I was thinking like this would have been one of those perfect late 90s, early 2000s 3-part harmony opening songs with Larry Campbell and Charlie Sexton.
Yeah.
This would have been a perfect one to do live.
Absolutely. And now, in lieu of that, Roving Gambler was really big in the set for that time. And I was kind of thinking this song satelliting with a couple others. I
think there's a connection there between Rambler Gambler and Roving Gambler. A little bit. Yes, they're kind of, very similar.
That part of the song where he's constant and moving through the whole career. I like that he's always invitational as a performer in a way. There's many layers and that will shift over time, but particularly with this outlaw thing that people really didn't know what to make of as it was happening or as they were preparing for it. This year you could actually see him very logically putting this song in that set list and all these good vibe Bob things that are in that set. Like, I'm experimenting, I'm open, I'm vulnerable. I really don't know what the drummer's doing some of the time, but we're gonna make it work. Use the wrench, whatever. That's
an amazing point. The Outlaw tour, we all didn't know what it was gonna be. It ended up being amazing, and like Bob was having fun. Like the Rough and Rowdy Ways tour was also amazing, and there were aspects of that. But I think, like, to me personally, the way I experienced Rough and Rowdy Ways tour, and I went to 12 or 13 of those shows, 14 maybe, it was that he was presenting a completed piece of art that obviously in a very Bob Dylan way can shift and move and grow and change. But there was something about the freewheeling, open shirt, thing about with all these buddies around that never shared a stage with him, but just something unlocked, this like funness about him just was unlocked. And I could see him throwing that in there. Adam Selzer talks about, and Robin Harr talk about, we did a bonus episode where they talked to them right after the first one, where like it was just a free-for-all, basically, right? Bob Dylan was in a complete free-for-all of those first 2 Outlaw shows. And so I could totally see him like throwing this in there, right? For a good 3-4 minute song or something like that. Yeah, why not? How many times have you seen Bob live?
I actually know that number exactly now because it happened to be, I think my last Rough and Rowdy Ways show was my 50th.
Oh!
And my first show with my 11-year-old son was my 51st. That was the summer.
That's great.
I mean,
You're 11 ahead of me. My goal is to catch up this spring and summer. So you'll still be ahead.
I have no doubt you will.
That's awesome. Oh, you hit your 50th last year.
It was cool.
Great. I had my 40th at the last show at the Tinley Park.
Yes. That was the one I made.
That was your 51st with your son?
Yeah.
Were you guys on the lawn?
We got pretty good seats, decent,
nice.
kind of a little bit to the side, and because that was my main concern. I'm like, I want him to be able to actually see the show the show in front of the show, and we did. He wore my green hat, I wore this hat.
Nice.
We were within view of him most of the time. Now, actually, he's a John Mellencamp fan.
Oh, did he enjoy that?
He did, and was standing and do it. The sing along part was hilarious and great, and but for Dylan, he sat and he watched, and he knew a good handful of the songs, and took a nap for some of the dark ones, so I got to kind of tune in for those. It was nice, but
He didn't know Under the Red Sky.
I was so happy to see that in the set list, because I'm like, that's gonna, we can follow the word. That's one of the kids' songs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's awesome. Well, looking forward to adding more shows.
Indeed.
So, Big About goes on. When you get to Wyoming, a letter you'll see. If you get into trouble, just you write and tell me. For once I had a lover, her age was 16. She's a flower of velvet and the rose of Celine. So he seems to be doing like a pairing of sort of storytelling, travel, what kind of person I am, verse, and then something like sweet and romantic or suggestive or flirty. Yeah, I mean the sort of like the first part is like just sort of a good old cowboy. I'm moving from here to here, and I'm this kind of person song, and then but he combines it with like this. Come here, more of this lover stuff.
Yeah.
Don't love that her age was 16 and he's 19, but whatever.
It was the early 60s.
She was just 17. I mean, we've seen this before. It doesn't hold up.
No, right.
Whatever.
He might do some revisions if he brings it to stage. Yeah.
Maybe the storyteller in this is also 16. Let's just go with that. As I said, it's traditional, not attributed to any writer, but it's been performed by Joan Baez, Odetta, Simon and Garfunkel under a different name. The song, not the people. Clancy Brothers, just loads and loads more. And as I mentioned, Alan Lomax was really the one who made it sort of popular, and it was even on an album called like Cowboy Songs and stuff. Like it's he's like telling you like this is the type of folk music that's cowboy folk music.
I'm the organizer, Alan.
Yeah, exactly. So I mentioned earlier the thing about him being sort of the main villain, at least towards the end. If someone was going to be a villain, obviously you can see things through all sorts of points of view. And actually he was rolling around with Albert Grossman at Newport. That actually happened. But he wasn't as villainous as portrayed. Like, he wasn't a complete jerk. Like, I want to read something from, if you'll indulge me for a minute, Brendan. Elijah Wald, the author of Dylan Goes Electric, upon which the film was based, after the film, wrote some wonderful sort of expansions and explanations of things that were in the film and what the real thing was. And it wasn't a judgment. He was just like, he actually liked the film and obviously appreciated being there. Shout out to Elijah Wald and Dylan Goes Electric, by the way. Amazing book and amazing person. But he was putting out these wonderful Facebook posts just with these long explanations of things. And so I want to read a little bit about what he said about Lomax. He said both that the portrayal of him was pretty close, more so than what other people have written about Lomax. So I thought that was interesting. But he's also very generous at times. He says, Lomax did not hate electric instruments or rock and roll. He was indeed a folk purist, but not in that way. For him, folk music was the vernacular of music of working class communities. So, for example, the folk music happening in New York in the late 1950s was what groups like Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers were singing in Harlem, not middle-class college students playing banjos in Washington Square. And he later says, he loved all of that, being rock and roll. He said he did not love folks like Dave Van Ronk. and the New Lost City Ramblers. He was a close friend of Pete Seeger's, but detested Pete's idea that everyone should pick up guitars and banjos and try to sing folk songs. To Lomax, that was dumbing down and disrespecting music with deep, complex traditions and skills, and he had no interest in Dylan or any of the other young songwriters, and did his best to keep them out of the Newport limelight, which he thought should be shining on authentic folk artists. So what I think is generous is that I think all of that came through in the performance of that character of Alan Lomax in the movie. I think he was being sincere about whatever it was. He was an and part of it, you're thinking like, there's Bob effing Dylan bringing it all back home and Highway 61 before your eyes, and you're not into it. What? Obviously, there's that
checklist. Yeah.
But I just want to say, like, I think it's interesting that he was true to what his vision of what folk music should be. So even that Pete Seeger, the godfather of singing communities, like, there's that scene where he steps off mic and has everyone doing a Weem Away. That was what Pete Seeger did so beautifully, was like anyone could come together and sing a folk song together. And Alan Lomax believed, it seems to me, that from this, that he believed that folk singers, real good, talented folk singers, should sing folk songs. That is all to say, I wonder what the real Alan Lomax would and did, well, probably didn't know this recording, but would have thought of this recording, the song that he sort of brought to the forefront.
Oh, right, and what Dylan did with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just wondering out loud in this moment, because I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's striking to me. To go that it wasn't so much like, it wasn't a rivalry like of that moment, or of as they were getting ready for the concert, as the snapshots of the film brings you along, but. It was, and also just very much policy. Like, you could write out what his views were, and that's what.
Shout out to Elijah Walds, amazing. Thank you for that gift. And maybe another time I'll read more of that. Not but it's it's quite long, but quite interesting. It's like a bonus chapter from this book.
And I guess to tie that into the movie and Dylan's perspective, like, you could see. Like, I like that this is right out of St. Paul, and then like quickly he sees another game in New York City, and quickly drops some of his plans and puts the pencil to the notebook and writes, gets to work.
Right. right. I mean, he was, at least the way it's portrayed in the movie, and I think this part felt very real, was he's like itching to get all of those songs that were inside of him out, and he's playing all these other people's songs. Yeah. And that's why I think like Freewheelin' Bob Dylan is such a dumping of like an insane amount of original, iconic, forever lasting material all at once, because it was already inside of him.
That's right.
He was just singing stuff like this. Yeah. Which I don't think is bad that he was. I really love that first album. But it's that sort of stuff, those songs walked so Freewheelin' Bob Dylan could fly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
The last couple stanzas, her parents was against me, now she is the same. If I writ on your book, love, just you blot out my name. Oh, there's a change in the ocean, there's a change in the sea, there's a change in my true love, ain't no change in me. This is like, it's now starting to get a little sad. Like, he's first sort of like a tough guy who you don't want to mess with, and kind of a flirt and romantic. But now, like, the parents don't like him, right? And she doesn't like him either.
Yeah, his sad story got sadder. And
you'll blot out my name, like that's biblical. Blot, that's how you get rid of an enemy. You blot out their name so you can't even remember. That's how much this woman.
Hard forget.
Did you say hard forget?
The hard forget.
The hard forget. Yeah. The sort of Men in Black. Yeah. But then when he ends, there's changes in the ocean, there's changes in the sea, there's changes in my true love, ain't no change in me. You see, like, he's starting to soften, because this character is seeing all the change. He's very aware of it. Ocean, sea, true love. But nope, ain't no change in me. Right. He's stubborn till the end. he kind of comes back to that first verse where he's a total punk and don't mess with him.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the very 19-year-old aspect of it is there. He's like, yep, this is it. This is the way I'm going to roll.
Yeah, and that way, Brendan, it's very true to maybe the age. I mean, I could see like a seasoned veteran cowboy also singing this too, like who's been hardened by life and true love and
right. And I think that's in the verses of that original ones that I heard of briefly. Yeah, I thought that was more of that. The guy who's got, I think there's something, there's an animal in there that he's got in place of the girl or something like that. So.
In the Alan Lomax.
Yeah. So it's definitely more of like, this is a guy who's just trying to figure things out more.
Yeah. Yeah, and in the Alan Lomax version, her age was 19, so that's a little better.
Now, this version gets, I don't know where she picked it up, but it ended up on the B-side of Linda Ronstadt's albums, like in 1980 or something like that.
That's amazing.
Followed up of one of her more punky new wave songs on the other side. So, and it's this pretty little, very nice country version.
That's awesome. I love that. Like, so it lives on, and I mean, you could say Alan Lomax's vision
right.
was. Holds up there, at least for Rambler Gambler. Yeah. And it's called different things. It's like Ramblin' Gambler, The Rambler Gambler, Rambler, Gambler, right. Ramblin' and Gamblin'.
Right. Sometimes just the Rambler or something maybe.
Oh, right. Simon and Garfunkel, their version was Rose of Aberdeen.
Mm-hmm. That's right. It goes great.
Clancy Brothers, Moonshiner.
Mm-hmm.
There's a connection between Bob Dylan and the Clancy Brothers, right? He loved them.
I really wanted to see Clancy make an appearance in this movie, but
he might have been at that table at the beginning, right? Like Dave Von Ronk is unnamed.
Right, he could have been in there. Yeah.
He was. I mean, he's credited in the credits. The guy who tells Bob where to go in the bar at the beginning to go see Woody is Dave, and then later they're talking at the party, and he's like lecturing them about Hank Williams and country blues, and songs. He says we're all playing the same song. We all keep playing the same song over and over again, and Bob's sort of like, but anyway, Dave Von Ronk, yes, that was one of those ones. Yeah, and the Clancy, that would have been cool if the Clancys had been there. Yeah. What other things about the lyrics that interest you, or like the guitar playing?
I like that. I like his first little guitar playing's fine. It's pretty as simple as it goes, but
it's just GDC.
It's there. He goes right up to the high notes in the beginning of the song. He's not really too shy in what he's trying to reach for. I guess the song conceptually, I like the idea that Dylan's still working as kind of a gateway artist, going from the traditional side to just throwing the song out there and getting it out and circulating, and then recirculating it around No Direction Home, and that he continues to like point directions to the artists around him, and has always kind of done that.
Right. I mean, playing these songs is important to him, it seems, and those artists around him. I mean, he wrote a book about all the artists that influenced him, right? Yeah, I wonder which version of this he was listening to that spoke to him. I mean, it probably was Alan Lomax, because that was probably what was on the radio, and that's how he was listening to music at a young age, and he was going to the record store. But it's funny, of all things, to end up as the second ever recording. Right. It's really interesting. This is like there must have been something to this one. Is there anything else you want to say about this song? Or about Bob Dylan in general?
Yeah, right.
This is your chance.
Oh, gotta finish on this note. No, I mean, I really hope he puts it on the set list. Like they're polished up. Want to hear a fresh version of it?
Is that a song that's like on any of your like top lists or anything? Or
no, it really. I had it. There were a couple other songs I was thinking of when we first discussed during, and it just kind of spoke to this song paired with like when I was young, when I left home and stuff like that. It's just neat, some of his like songs that he's kind of occupied that persona throughout, some of those, maybe not so much during the 80s. It's not an exceptionally special song, but thought it would just be worth talking about and going back and thinking about young Dylan, and he's got the different stages of where he's kind of bookended his career. I like how the starting of those consistent sets of 2013 or 12, whenever that was, kind of like made people start talking about 65 and 66 again, and those static set lists, and I think they're always, the young Dylan and older Dylan's always communicating as the Rambler Gambler show.
Yeah, and especially now with A Complete Unknown, that version of Dylan is very much in the zeitgeist, and rightly so. And I'm really appreciative of the movie, actually, for forcing me to listen to those songs from that 4-year period again. I've mentioned this a few times, so apologies, but I've mostly spent the last decade listening to live recordings of Bob Dylan from 1990 to the present. Whatever the last 10 years, whatever the present is, it's just been
right.
To like go back and be like, oh, let's listen to Bob Dylan and Freewheelin' and
Right.
Times Are Changing, Another Side, and then bring it all back home. It's been such a gift that the movie gave to me all over. I'm like rediscovering, and for years, you said you took your son to you have an 11-year-old. You took your son to the Outlaw tour and he had a good time.
Right.
So since my children were babies, they're now 7 and 5. I've been trying to get them to listen to Bob Dylan, like play like Froggy Went a Courtin', be like, this is a fun kid song, and like they're like, what? We don't care. But I started. They knew Dad was going to see the Bob Dylan movie, multiple times. And where are you going to tonight, Dad? You're going to see the Bob Dylan movie again?
Right around the corner.
and so I started playing the soundtrack, and they dug it. And then I was like, wait a minute, I'd like throw on Highway 61 Revisited, and they went nuts for that slide whistle, and for Tombstone Blues, The Sun's Not Yellow, It's Chicken, like there's that, like, and then Freewheelin', they're interested in it. And like when I play, they recognize like Rolling Stone now, and I realized, oh, that's how you're supposed to absorb Bob Dylan, is like the normal way, where those great songs, you listen to them first and then you expand on the other things.
Right.
So this is like the prequel.
Yeah.
Prequels are all the rage now. Every amazing property or bad property that's ever been made are now the prequels are being made, and like this is kind of unlocked some of that.
Yeah, maybe it'll be a Netflix series. The early years.
Any 4 years, I think Chalamet even said this. Any 4 years of Bob Dylan's entire life would be fascinating movie.
No doubt.
Really, I mean, even before the 4 years before that, and that was a sort of a disappointment I heard from a lot of people. Not a critique, but like when they heard either about the movie or after the movie, I would say non-Bob Dylan people. Like I really wanted to see like him in high school in Minnesota, and I was like, yeah, that would have been cool. But I'm also like really just happy with what the movie is.
Right, and so. I kind of like that. I like to preserve that, especially childhood. That's early childhood. I'm like, I do like not knowing a certain degree of information about Bob Robert Zimmerman,
right?
And I think of him most oftenly as that performing artist, and where is taking stabs at his art and gestures and wrenches that he brings to the stage.
Right.
But the movie too, not only the songs that it selected, it sort of delivered them individually. So you got to kind of like hear them out of the album context, and it put a little fresh sparkle on it, and it will, hope it continues to draw a lot of visitors.
I hope so too. I mean, that first song to Woody, it's just the camera slowly, in about the third verse, moves in to Bob, and it's when, and I noticed it because I was also watching Timmy play the guitar, because Song to Woody, that's like a really fun song to play. You're a guitarist, right?
Yeah.
So that was one of the early things I learned to play on guitar that was more than just the chords, like adding that sort of little lick. Right. And I was watching Timmy to see if he does it right, and I was impressed with how well he plays it. And then at a certain point, the camera panned in. I was like, I can't see his hands anymore. They're going for it. And then I was just completely overcome with emotion.
Yeah, I mean, that was real powerful. That song too, in particular, like that does something for not the young kids, but the generation older than me, and of people my parents' age who are not like Dylan fans, or the ones who are like, oh yeah, nice, good guy, bad voice. They they might not have ever heard that song, and to hear him open with that song as a Dylan song, and just like it's just got inherent beauty to it.
Yeah,
it'd be hard to walk away from that untouched.
Yeah, and I mean, people early on were really fascinated by his voice. Like that thing that that people love saying, like they love qualifying and whatever about Bill. I mean, great songwriter. He has a terrible voice. People love telling Bob Dylan people that. Right. Anyway, whatever that thing was, like people were blown away by his voice, and they couldn't believe he was
hypnotic.
Yeah, hypnotic. Yeah. Right. There were all these like little pieces that put together. I mean, even that scene in A Complete Unknown when Albert Grossman and Bob are getting into the elevator and he's reading the review. And he's like the cherubic face, the cabbie hat or whatever he calls it, Dutch boy hat, something. I forget what the word is. He used it. And Bob's like, stop, and then he says something about his voice, his singing, and his guitar playing, and then Bob grabs it. Like, let me see that.
That's classic.
So, all respect, though, by the way, to Timmy, that I'm just calling him Bob. So.
Really appreciate it.
Did you see the SNL performances of Timothy Chalamet?
I did. I watched.
What did you think of those deep cuts?
Well, the selections were amazing. And I liked he was pretty. I'd take him for his word that he's like, I just picked 3 of my real favorites, and like, that's cool. And he. I presume this music is some of what I've read about. He has his own music background aside from preparing from this role. So the spin of some of that New York sound in there and into those songs was interesting, just very apropos for Saturday Night Live too. But yeah, both separate from the style of Bob Dylan he delivered in the movie, and also that like he just earnestly sang these very different types of Dylan songs. And
Tomorrow Is a Long Time, great choice, by the way. Another technically a greatest hit, right?
I should have picked that song. One of my favorites.
No one's picked it yet if you want to save it for next time. But that was such a great choice, and I noticed that he was singing it less like the character of Bob Dylan that he played. I think that was Timothy Chalamet covering Tomorrow's a Long Time, the way I experienced it, and the way I could tell he was performing and singing. He was different than what his Bob Dylan performance was, which was great. I mean, he's very talented. The other choices also were just bonkers. I figured out, Outlaw Blues, he said, was his favorite song, Bob Dylan song, so I figured that could have been coming. But yeah, that was amazing. That was amazing. Is there anything else you want to say about Bob Dylan?
Oh my gosh, I got a lot covered. I'll save some for next time.
Okay. All right. Great. Brendan, where can folks find you if they want to talk about Rambler Gambler? No, any Bob Dylan thing.
Well, I'm on Facebook, Brendan O. McCarthy. I chat and post art-related photos and topics and stuff like that. I write on Expecting Rain off and off on the tour page more specifically now. Feel free to read and whatever. Chat Dylan.
What's your Expecting?
That's a Mary Lama. I figure most people read on that might recognize my mannerisms here as well. I write very much in the same way. Awesome. Some of my reviews have been more, just focused on the detailed experience of me and whoever goes with me to the show. So it's fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Brendan. That was amazing. Yeah, we got to do it again. Tomorrow's a long time. It's yours. Thank you so much for listening and watching. Look for the next episode on the 15th day of the month in all of your podcast feeds. You can give me a follow on Blue Sky at Henry Bernstein. If you're subscribing to Apple Podcasts, please take a moment to give us a rating and a review. For a video version of this podcast, please visit and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/@songsofbobdylan. You can email us at songsofbobdylan@gmail.com. Thank you to my friend and mentor Rob Kelly for designing our fabulous logo, and to my mandolin teacher Mark Mitchell from the Old Town School of Folk Music in Chicago. Lastly, if you would like to help support the cost of hosting my podcasts, go to patreon.com/gonzo3249. For $5, I'll show my gratitude by giving you a shout out. So thank you to Rob Kelly, Roberta Rakov, Matt Simonson, Josh Taft, and Christopher Vani. For $10, I'll also send you a surprise piece of vintage Bob Dylan merch. So thank you to the girl from the North Country, Katie Surovic. Thank you to Mark Godfrey over on Substack. You folks make this show happen. Truly, I love you all. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.